Welcome to the weekly DAO call on Tuesdays. Seems I am the last one on stage. Last man staging. Hey, Archimedes promised to rescue me in like 10 minutes. Legend, you wanted to do the on the bounty for Kirk what was paid today. You wanted to add and remove the payment to use the feature that we are not using, but you want to use. So do the honors, please. Take it from a German. I think you're overcomplicating this. It's not. We are not using the payment process. We are basically like fake using it now and making ourselves do more work. But I mean, if you really want to do it, but don't come crying later. I have to do this every time, Ryder. Reward me. No. I will strongly object. Didn't the... Oh, Dean, I see you're back. Didn't you have this event at your place in Athens, the real life event? Did it take place already? Ah, okay. Yeah, sorry, I wasn't there on Sunday. When you probably talked about on Sunday. I have to listen to the recording. Sounds great, Dean. Archimedes, you don't have to type. You still have 5 minutes to speaking. I don't know about reputation. We have our reputation god, Mr. Potrock here.
Hey, what's up, Ryder?
Hey, Potrock, how you doing?
I'm good. I heard Reputation, so I immediately rushed on stage.
Are you in Europe or in US right now?
I'm in Europe, yeah.
Okay, so it's not late for you or something
Soon
like
in,
that.
no, it's all good. Yeah. How about you? You traveling?
No, I'm I'm in the land of free driving.
Oh yeah. Do you have a nice car?
Too much information.
Yeah.
I went faster a few times. It's all right. Yeah, if we want to talk about reputation, somebody asked. Archimedes asked.
Oh yeah. So I can do a little recap on what we did last week. Basically, we didn't really have like a workshop format or anything. We took the time to kind of discuss how to start reputation because it's been a while since we've spoken about it. Also, from just a technical perspective, a lot of the stuff that scientist Joe's model kind of expresses is really complicated,
Yeah.
and there aren't really clear calculations to it. So,
Yeah,
what we thought.
What
Yeah,
what
go
I
ahead.
got from a vote, what I got from a vote is that what you proposed, your model was like the technically feasible thing to do, and his was like the DAO would wish that this is possible. It's more like a long-term
Exactly.
goal.
Exactly. And it's actually, it takes into account so many parameters that it accurately reflect what we want reputation to. But as a starting point, Archimedes had already started building his version of a model that he thought would best reflect how reputation could work to start. So it's a feasible model in the sense that it takes into account governance. And it's doubly feasible because basically we would export the governance, feed it through the calculations that he does in a spreadsheet that anyone can see and access. And then we would vote on attributing reputation manually through the normal governance process. This way, we can begin to experiment with this model. And at some point, based on how the reputation tokens are distributed, choose to use them in governance if we want. If we think that the number of tokens attributed to each member reflects what we want governance to represent. So it's like a very light way of kind of introducing reputation and having it be based on something that we all value.
Okay. What kind of amount of votes are we talking?
I don't think we've really gotten to that part yet, at least in a concrete way. Our community just published on Discord the link to his model, I think. But on my end, I haven't. There he is. Cool.
Hello.
What's up, Archimedes?
Sorry, I'm late. I didn't mean to call anybody out to start talking about stuff. I was just trying to make sure we're all visibly aware of what we think the agenda should be for today, because I think we have at least 2 proposals that are outstanding. We don't really have any proposals for the epoch, and these are lingering issues that need to be resolved, and I think we probably should discuss them as a DAO. I'm under the impression that everybody's waiting for someone to usher in the conversation. So the discussion we had on, thank you for the conversation we had on reputation, because I think that was needed. I feel like we might be in a little bit of a limbo state on how to move forward. So
Yeah, we are in a limbo state in multiple dimensions.
Archimedes, maybe you can talk a little bit about the model that you're thinking about and how it accounts for different factors like voting and time and proposals. But basically, if we want to come to a consensus on what Archimedes is proposing, at least there is a very visible and feasible next step to this.
Yeah, and just to clarify, the model calls out the need to add in some weight for reputation. That can be replaced, right? So if we come to a different consensus on what we think reputation, then we can always change that out of the model in general. And what I expect to do, and I'm pretty sure that this just needs a series of snapshots if people haven't taken the time to look at the proposal for the governance rewards that would basically retroactively look back to all the epochs that have passed and reward all the current wallets staking for their participation in each rolling two epochs. But the reputation itself as a model calls out participation in proposals over time, votes over time, activity per epoch, how many epochs somebody was active, for instance. That represents participation as a percentage of time. So you're effectively looking at your participation in proposals versus all proposals that were created. Your participation in votes versus all votes that are cast throughout that same time period. Your participation in every epoch compared to all epochs that exist as a percentage. So let's say that there have been 10 epochs. We're closing in on 11 soon, right? Because November's almost up. But of the 10 epochs that have been active, how many did you participate in? If you participated in 9 out of those 10, that's 90%. If 8 out of those 10, it's 80%, right? If you participated, if we have 1,824 votes, then, did you participate in all the proposals that have been submitted, which were 54, right? 54 of those proposals, you could have voted 54 times out of 54. And that would have been a percentage of what the overall votes that you were able to cast, which is reflected in the individual reward proposal, right? So your individual reward is going to depend on how many proposals were there and did you vote on all of them? But the reputation is going to look at your participation on a whole for that whole time period. And it takes into account all those metrics as ratios, so to speak, that are inversely correlated to whether or not, the overall group, because your reputation is relative, right? Our reputation as people is relative to the behaviors and actions of others according to what's capable or accessible for us to do, right? And in this case, we're narrowing it down to there's a specific time period that we're looking at and a specific type of action that we're focusing on. And that action is proposals and votes. It's difficult to try and quantify anything else that isn't on chain. So the different ways in which you can manipulate that data and play around with it is vast. You can take the total amount of grapes staked, your total staked as a percentage of a weight, a voting weight, right? During that time frame, and that counts towards what you should receive, the percentage of grape that you should receive as a result of how much grape you've been staking. The more grape you stake, the more you're entitled to for the actions that you're executing. That's the theory, that's the concept behind it, right? If I go into the details on the specific formula, it's all baked into the the Google spreadsheet that accompanies the proposal. And there are 2 different variations of governance reputation weight. One that's just purely based on the activity, and another one that's purely based on the activity weighted by the epochs that you actually participated in. So somebody who actively participates in, a certain number of votes over time, that's great. But did they participate in all the epochs over time? Because one epoch can have more proposals than another, and it's more indicative of, making sure that time as a factor also reflects in reputation, which is something that's hard to adjust for. It's something that's difficult to say there's an easy qualifier. So making it percentage based automatically adds in the weight that incentivizes somebody to say, yeah, I need to act on this as regularly as possible, as consistently as possible. And every time there's a proposal, if I want the maximum rewards, right? And we're talking about this in governance rewards context, but this is the same thing as reputation. If you think about it, should people trust that I'm someone that has been proactively supporting the DAO and the governance that's been ongoing? Or is it just something where I only vote on a percentage of the proposals that are created? Why does that matter? Because if I create proposals myself just for the incentive of trying to create votes for myself because I want to get rewarded, that's nice. And it's definitely interesting to reevaluate why that matters. But in a nutshell, taking the history and then taking the most recent epochs and comparing them, and then adding in factors that say you participated in each epoch over time, percentage based. All of these things are percentage based in some way, shape, or form because they're all ratios to how you relatively perform in comparison with all your peers within the same ecosystem and environment against the same actions that they had the opportunity to act upon as well. So it normalizes, reputation should normalize what it is that we're saying you're being repudiated for, what it is that you're receiving a reputation for. Just being a participant and creating actions that are capable of generating activity is useful. But the question then becomes, are others acting upon it as well? If you're alone in anything that you're doing, it doesn't necessarily mean you're wrong. However, chances are, something that you do to yield some level of reputation also needs a qualifier that it has a level of quality and importance. So the other part to this is filtering out the proposals that we deem to be valid. And if you look at DeepDAO as an example that has metrics, DeepDAO will show you 138 proposals roughly. And the reality is that the number of proposals that are actually successful are around 54 from the start of the governance period. And that's basically proposals that have been completed or successful in general, just by status purely, right? Without putting any qualifiers for how many votes, whether or not the quorum reached 80% of the overall Grape stake, none of that stuff that might seem like it should be included, or 70% or 75% or stuff like that. Does that all make sense so far? Because I'm enjoying the memes that come in talking about this, but I really don't see many others talking about reputation and moving it forward other than us. So
Yeah,
I find it funny, and I love everybody in the community, but really just trying to get to a place where we can turn around and say everybody deserves.
maybe if we want to make this accessible to a wider audience, maybe we should bribe Dynite to spend time with you to come up with some visualizations, because it is active listening. It is active listening.
Yeah, so here's what I'm going to do. And I was thinking about this yesterday because I realized that most of what I'm doing is talking out loud, and it may not be reflecting very well. So I'm just going to try and put this into a very quick snapshot using the spreadsheet that I put together, because I think it's really easy to use if you know what's in it. Let's see. Bear with me one moment. It probably would help if I just shared the document with everybody here if they haven't already seen that spreadsheet, which is open to all. But here's a snapshot. I'm putting it in the live chat. And again, if we agree or disagree with this approach, that's fine. I just want an approach that we can say we can start this discussion and potentially get ourselves to a place where we can agree that everybody that has been participating in governance deserves some semblance of reward for that.
Everything envisioned for you, you know
Yeah.
which knobs you can turn around and how the curve changes and which people get more rewarded, which people get less rewarded in the sense of how much reputation. And for like the average DAO member listening in weekly, it's not easy to get to the same level of competence with these screenshots or with these tables. But
Right.
well,
Communities.
Yeah.
If you want, like we can work on how to like to make it more like legible or consumable. Like one of the things that I thought might help in terms of understanding the impact of this is like at the end of every epoch, how many points does everyone have? And what does that represent in terms of the proportion of ownership of reputation? That way you get like a benchmark idea of like where you sit or where another wallet sits.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the document, it's all in there, and it also includes, and there's additional fields to the right where all of this is presentable in one view, so that it's not unclear how the calculations were determined. And I can understand that this might appear complex. It's just all the data actually presented in a very simplified format by comparison to a lot of the complexity that I've seen in other discussions. So what this has tried to do is just simplify. There are a lot of other data ingested pieces here. There are other sheets that are being called to bring in this data into this one view. And all of these values are important because they can have an impact on the rewards that you reserved or deserved for that particular time period. And you'll notice in the first view, the first snapshot, the darker boxes that you see above are the general statistics that show things like what the reward pool is versus the total governance staked. If you go further down, you'll find the total reward pool versus what the valid pool is, according to how much Grape was staked and used for voting over the time periods that exist. And then if you look on the second snapshot, it's basically the same rows again, but focused more on the most recent epoch to be able to weight the decision on what your participation was in the last two epochs for you to be able to reserve and deserve the reward A or reward B that show up in column the columns below, the white columns, the ones that you see below those darker boxes at the top. In the first snapshot, way down below, you see the wallets and you see the rewards that they receive, and you see the voting per wallet. You see the number of proposals per wallet. You see the number of stake weight according to how much Grape they have, the median Grape that they've had during the epoch time period that you're looking at, so you can actually weight it against what they actually had and not a snapshot that's taken randomly in time. So it's fair. And it only qualifies for individuals that actually maintain 70% or more of the grape that they had during the time period that they were participating. With a very simple flick of the wrist, I could take this data right now using the tools that are in this spreadsheet, and we can change the time periods from the proposal grids and the pivot tables that you'll see to the right of this spreadsheet, which is the proposal Grape DAO governance rewards. And you can automatically create all the snapshots for every epoch that we've needed to reward people for governance, and we could put the discussion on rewarding people for their participation over time in motion. If we want to scrutinize the specific formulas, that's fine, and anybody can take a look at the spreadsheet. And if you want to try and simplify this, be my guest. But I think that most of this data is important to understand, filtering down to specific data points on why somebody deserves more of an APY or more grape than someone else for that given epoch time period, if their overall total votes look like there's so much more, or their total proposals are so much more. It comes down to being weighted against the most recent two epochs, which are further to the right, and intentionally so. But, if people want to simplify this even further, that's fine. I haven't seen a simpler model to date. And I have seen models in which we attribute a score to each type of activity, which I think is useful. But, I'm just taking the metrics as is, computing them in a way that meant rewarding those individuals for the appropriate tasks and activities, voting in proposals, and making sure that this system can't be gamed if the whole DAO is participating. And if the DAO isn't participating, it reduces the amount of grape that's even possible to receive in the first place. So, hey presto, we have something that can work without us having to make decisions or think about whether or not the people deserve certain rewards, because they're dynamic and they're according to quote unquote forces of activity, not just subjective notions of what we think something is worth according to what we've allocated as a pool. So we've said in this proposal, the pool is 500,000 grape. 20% of it goes to proposers, 80% of it goes to voters. It's dynamically adjusted according to how much grape participates in both of those respects.
May I interject a question?
Please.
We are very detailed right now, and what is the overall end goal of implementing reputation? Why are we doing this?
So, as far as I can tell, what I'm describing right now is governance rewards that deserve reciprocation, because we need to give users that are part of the Grape DAO additional voting power to offset any discussions that have to do with participation and emissions and anything else that could come out of the woodwork. Reputation comes into play to try and prevent and mitigate or to promote those that are active and deemed to be reputable, right? So I think reputation just fits into the mold of making sure that people who are deemed to be receiving something or should be receiving something are doing so in the vein that, there's a very simple formula for calculating that, as opposed to someone having to sit and look through spreadsheets and call out whether or not, someone's activity is worth rewarding.
Let me try to rephrase that so that I understood it completely. We are implementing reputation because we want to assure that the people who are contributing to DAO governance, because this is only about governance right now, that they have a voice in the DAO, even no matter what we do with any rewards, and if somebody buys in like in a kleptocratic way. Is that correct? Or did I miss something?
No, that's a good way of phrasing it. It's I think it's part of it, definitely. It's reciprocating and making sure that those that are participating in governance continue to have additional voting power to be able to make decisions in governance as the future unfolds. and for the past work that has been produced and the past actions that have been executed, for them to receive an analogous reward that enables them to continue being a very important voice in the DAO, to offset any dilution that might come from other sources, and or any manipulation that could come from outside sources that find it opportunistic to play games with the DAO, is to make sure that there's a decentralized distribution of the grape that exists in a fair and meritocratic manner, as we've stated as one of our visions and I think missions, which I don't think that's going to change necessarily, but obviously we'll figure that out as we complete those discussions.
Okay, just the last point I'm going to note down as prevent hostile takeover.
That's one of the, it's definitely one of the added benefits. It's not the main goal, but
Yes,
it does that inherently.
so I got as major why we're doing it, I got implement to reward the ones participating in governance. And then as subnotes, I got reward for past work and actions, assure that they are able to influence future DAO as an important voice. Then second, offset dilution of other sources or via other sources. And as third sub point, I got decentralize in a fair meritocratic way and prevent hostile takeover.
Yep. And in this case, reputation is only added as a weight against the activity because governance is an absolute action, right? So the weight of your reputation would enable you to receive the full. It's very similar to your notion, writer and red, of what you were talking about for bounties, where there's effectively a cap on how much the DAO is emitting every epoch or every 2 epochs for this, for the activity, and it's going to be emitted every epoch if we do it this way. But there's a cap on how much you can receive from the DAO on whole, right? And chances are distributing it and dividing it up appropriately, which is a very difficult task to do if you try to do that every epoch and you just try to divide and make fixed amounts for the number of actions that somebody executes. Eventually you're going to find out that that's not going to work because the number of events is going to change, and the more activity you have or the less activity you had, that changes dynamically. To incentivize that activity, it has to be dynamic to some extent, but it also has to be something where it's hard to game and it works without anybody making the decision for us. The numbers speak for themselves. The metrics are there already. So I'm just quantifying it and making it objective.
So you're saying it's only a weight that's added to governance?
Correct.
And there should be a cap.
I think in general, the ability for anybody to receive rewards within the community for any activity that belongs to incentives or initiatives that Grape has, there should be an inherent cap. In general, I don't think the whole treasury would be something anybody would distribute all governance rewards.
Yes, I agree.
Right. There's a certain limit, and it's also the discussion on inflows, outflows that needs to still be evaluated. But this is purely about governance. This is purely about making sure that the DAO is healthy. Short and sweet. Shortest answer I could say is that's really all reputation is in this context, because it's reputation specific to participation in governance. It's not the overall reputation that takes external factors like Me6 and other bots and other details, right? This is purely reputation based on the way that you've participated in realms.
Yeah, on-chain only.
Exactly. Anything that's on-chain that could be quantified or qualified and, codified if we were able to get there.
Guys, everybody listening in, if you already know what I'm asking or something like that, then write in live chat and I will let Archimedes continue. But I want to be very clear about this. I'm just asking questions here, and if I'm holding you up, then please write in live chat and I will shut up. personally, I'm very interested in the notion of caps and how you envision the caps to be done.
If anyone's interested, I mean, the whole point here was that, and one of the reasons this took so long is because I played around with a lot of different models, which I did not put into the proposal, which would have definitely confused us even further. The notion of being able to create dynamic pricing, quote unquote, I'm calling it dynamic pricing, the dynamic weighting.
Last time we talked, you had dynamic pools.
Dynamic pools, yes, but what I tried to take it a step further, where trying to evaluate whether or not votes could be quantified dynamically, right? To say a vote is worth 1 grape today, or a vote is worth 100 grape today, right? For this epoch. Why? Because the activity overall would tell you how much a vote is worth based on the number of votes that happened. Just like instead of the pool being dynamic, why not make the activities dynamic, right?
But doesn't that happen kind of automatically if you say we are emitting a fixed amount for governance rewards, and so if a small number of people participates, then the single person participating is worth more than when more people participate, because the participation reward per person gets diluted?
Yeah, but it was an attempt at getting it to the point that it was so transparent and simple to understand that for every vote you get this much grape as a result of it, right? Without going into all these percentages and ratios and all this other stuff.
Okay.
You know what I mean? It was trying to arrive at a point where we could say that there's a dynamic demand and supply type discussion of proposals and voting. How much is a proposal worth? How many proposals were created? Versus, the overall activity. And again, the stake weight has a lot to do with it. The total amount of grapes staked in realms versus the total amount used for voting versus the total amount used for proposals. All of those things play some factor because they matter at the end of the day.
So
for this to be dynamic in some way. And just for edification, if you look at the proposal in discourse and you go further down to the bottom, there are references to other models that were used as reference points just to see how much more complex this could have been.
I believe you right away if you say this could have been much more complex.
It could have. Trust me.
Maybe we go more into detail about this dynamic pricing to understand how this simplifies things and how this makes it easier.
Yeah. So taking into account the pools, if you look at the screenshot, the first screenshot that was provided, up in the top, you'll notice the darker boxes and you'll see
I see reward pool gov staked under periods.
To the far right-hand side, you'll see very specific stats and timeframes, which are two vertical columns, M and N. You probably can't see the M and the N, but if you look to the far right, you'll see current date, last snapshot date, and then you'll see at the top realms proposals in the last 2 epochs, realms votes in the last 2 epochs, for instance, right? If you look further down that last column, the very last column in that's the dark columns that you can see.
Do you mean this screenshot I pinged you with just now, or do you mean another screenshot?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, the first one. So if you look to the far right, the one that says epoch stats is the label at the top.
Yes, now I know where you are, yes.
Yeah. So if you look at that and you look further down, you can actually see what the proposal reward per proposal would be worth based on the number of proposals that took place, based on what the pool allocated was, the overall pool, right? So we divide and we say, we take 20% of the pool. How many proposals happened as a result of that? Divided by the number of proposals that happened that we consider to be valid. And that's how much each proposal is worth, right? Which becomes a static payout for each proposal to say one proposal equals 6,722 grape for those epochs. For prior epochs, it could change because there were less proposals, which means somebody can get up to 50,000 grape for a proposal because there were no other proposals.
Oh.
But that, again, that still adds in the illusion of rewarding people fairly. The problem is, it adds in a lot of other forces that could be more complicated. And if you look further down, that's just the proposals. If you look further down, you'll see that the votes also have the same approach. So there's the proposal reward per proposal last X epochs, which is 6,722. Then below that, you see proposal reward pool for the epoch was 94,000 grape out of the 100,000 that could have been allocated, because that's how much grape participated in governance over time versus all the grapes staked in realms. Then below that, you see vote reward per vote last X epochs. That's how much does each vote count for.
Okay, you're starting to lose me, so I think it's better I step in and ask questions again.
Okay, that's fine.
So you have this guaranteed proposal per proposal reward per proposal of 6,722.
Yeah, I'm
And
just going to take a snapshot of this so that people are looking at the same thing at the same time, because I'm realizing it's probably harder to navigate, and I apologize because I've been looking at this for so long I forgot. You guys probably haven't seen it as frequently, and that's probably a really bad view for you. 1 sec.
yeah, if I was kind of serious about bribing Dynite to spend time with you. I would if we really want the DAO to understand what we are doing here, we basically need to bribe Dynite to spend time with you. He will do it for free. He will do it for free.
All right, guys.
Boss says. Okay, yeah, we can go ahead, but Dynite will spend time with you for free.
I'd like the DAO to spend time in replying to my discourse if that's possible, and just telling me that it's too complicated, or people telling me something in general, because I'm watching everybody make their fun comments, and I appreciate it because I find it humorous and I'm enjoying the conversation. But I'm not seeing any feedback or alternatives, and so far we've implemented at least one governance model that we've shown isn't necessarily the best way to go about it. So if anybody has any suggestions like this, I'm more than open and willing to hear any of the criticisms that come with it, but I'd like for them to be tangible, because this is a little generic for me, especially when I think about the fact that no one's actually looked at this data, with the exception of several individuals that are looking at reputation, and we're not going to make any movement on this. Clearly.
We are kind of in the situation when you walk into a lecture, and when the professor talks about the topic, and you're basically drinking from the fire hydrant, drinking from the hose.
Understood.
And when the professor is like, any questions? And everybody is like shell shocked. And this is a little bit similar.
Look, I get that, and I'm not trying to criticize anybody or say that, what I'm trying to do is get to a place where we can have a productive conversation and find a solution to a problem that we clearly have, which is we have very little way of quantifying the work that we talk about, that we say is meritocratically rewarded. And this is a model that does that in a way that is actually simpler than it might appear. It's just very detailed in writing, so that all my thoughts and all the things that are embedded in it, which might seem hidden, are explained. And it's all in writing.
Personally, I just want to explain to you maybe why we don't have this detailed and constructive feedback you would like to have. And on the other hand, I'm trying to understand it personally, and with my questions also help the audience understand it.
Oh yeah, no, and I appreciate the fact that you're the one doing that, and you're also the one that's taking the time to do that. I was speaking more to the rest of our lovely DAO that gets to comment on anything to help direct this in the right vein, so that it gets done.
Okay, great. Then let's return to the proposal reward per proposal. And this is 6,722 grape. And you said this is static, but for
Static epoch time period, right? Because it's a snapshot of the last two epochs. So this would include October and it would include September. So September and October are combined as two epochs.
So every two epochs, every 2 months, there's a new calculation for this.
Right. So for November, tomorrow, we could basically look back throughout November and include October to be able to show whether or not people were active, because there were no proposals in November, theoretically, right? And reward people for the last two epochs. Again, running the same calculations.
So what dynamic pricing does is that it gives you a stable price for a governance action. And this stable price is recalculated periodically. Here, 2 months.
Right. And it would basically reflect what the maximum you could receive for executing a specific task, like a proposal or a vote, would be, as long as your reputation and the time that you've spent over time to execute on all this yields the percentage, right? Because you participated in all the proposals. You created all the proposals. You participated in all the epochs. So that's 100.
So when I let's say I make a proposal in this epoch for 6,722 grapes.
Mm-hmm.
And now what happens? With what variable does this get multiplied? So how much grape does come out of this one governance action? How is this determined?
However many proposals you executed and created within that epoch time period that we're looking at.
But you just mentioned that it also
let me take another snapshot of a previous epoch to show you the difference of what happens when you change the time frame, because that might be the answer to the confusion that I've
caused. I'm a little confused right now because you just mentioned that this is the maximum I can receive. So I think that
per proposal.
Yes. So let's say I didn't participate in every vote up to this point, which in reality I personally didn't. So
sure.
how would that reflect upon my one proposal for a maximum of 6,722 grape?
You don't get a reward for the proposal if you didn't create one, right?
I created the proposal, yes, but you mentioned that it's also linked to my past governance participation. Or did I get you wrong?
The reputation is right. So there is no model right now that's using these to dictate paying out based on these activities. I created these values so that we could have a very clear understanding of what the other models could have been. So let me just share another example of this. If I go back in time, you could see the first snapshot that I sent through, right? That basically calls these out in line item.
And now I'm seeing your second snapshot.
Yeah, so I'm showing you the second snapshot to show you that if I change the date ranges of what we're looking at as the valid time period, which is the epochs between August and September instead of September and October. Let me just triple check. Sec.
Yes, I see it's lowering the reward amount.
Correct. And that's based on the number of valid activities that occurred within that time period. 16 proposals, 493 realms votes within that time period, right? How much is a proposal worth? 5,882. Why? Because there are more proposals being executed, so it reduces the amount that each one is worth over time.
Yes.
Then, and each vote, if I'm not mistaken, each vote is, let's see, worth less because there were theoretically more votes as well, right? So it's dynamic in that if if our DAO, if somebody goes and creates one proposal and one vote, that's the only way they could get all the rewards, right? Theoretically, in that model. But that leaves a vulnerability. That's pretty straightforward, right? It doesn't take into account whether or not they participated in all the epochs, whether or not they participated in all the proposals, all the votes, etc.
Yes, and that was what I was asking about.
Yeah. So in the current model, the reward A and reward B, it's just a percentage of how much did you participate in all the proposals that existed for that epoch time period. How much did you participate for voting?
Okay, so
it's all the proposals that were executed. We're not using these specifically today, but we could if we wanted to go there. That was something that we thought about.
I don't think it's necessary. I just understood you wrong.
All good. I'm just saying I went down this path of thinking about this and thought that this was really cool, and this would be like the best way to do it because it's like forces of economics, supply and demand. It works by itself. It will increase or decrease or fluctuate according to participation. Same thing happens, but it's easier to game that in theory.
Okay, so the rewards are isolated per epoch in this model.
Yeah, I guess if I'm understanding what you mean by isolated, but yeah, it's you have a limit in how much grape you can receive according to your stake weight. That was the median for that time period, right? You can't receive more than the amount of grape you put into the pool is the first thing that needs to be a reminder. The only thing that you could receive grape for is under reward B for the proposals you created, which has a dynamic pricing according to how much grape was used to make proposals total. Because your stake weight. Sorry, go ahead.
What I meant specifically with isolated is that your past governance actions do not relate to the rewards you get for current governance actions, which, as I understood you, is valid because I'm only defining it for governance actions, not for staking or stake weight.
Right. And reward model B, that value includes reputation for the voting because reputation is over time, right? It adds in a weight for your recent activity, but calculates it as an average, adding in reputation as a weight to bring it up or down. So if you've been really active over time, but this epoch you didn't participate as much as you should have, you'll still get a little bit of a boost from the fact that you've had reputation over time in your voting specifically. That makes sense. And for the proposals, the weighting is how many epochs you participated in over time. Anyway, I know that this is obviously very confusing for everybody seeing it or reading it for the first time. It was posted on Saturday, and I tried my best to communicate some of this stuff. If there's a TLDR version that you'd prefer to see, I tried to bullet this in the proposal itself, which is actually a brief 10 bullets that calls out all these details in as much of an explanation, but as simple as possible in explaining what each thing is. And it's really not that complicated in my mind, but I understand that hearing it on your guys' end might be too much to take in in a single sitting.
I'm getting the impression that one format that could work to disseminate this information to the people is just pasting the formula like C1 and C2 in your Discord post onto a mirror board, and then kind of a bit classroom like to say, okay, this means this means that, this relates to.
Yep. No, I hear you.
Maybe, yeah. All the guys in the audience, all the listeners, please stop me if I'm having weird ideas. But these formulas are exactly what I was looking for. And
yeah,
help me.
I was hoping that this would be a collaborative discussion as well, not just you and me, obviously, but I have a tendency to talk and realize that not getting feedback is just as much of a response as getting feedback. So I think at the end of the day, I'll take a step back. I'm really looking forward to hearing more from others about this, and I'll do my best to just share all the details that have been put into the proposal and a lot of the discussions here. Really looking forward to seeing if anybody even thinks it's worth their time to look at it, or if they just want to come up with something totally different. That's fine. But again, not the first time I've created a proposal that's too complicated, but was the right answer for us at the time that was created, at least from my perspective. So, just looking to make progress if possible. Thank you, guys. I definitely have to hop off the call, but hopefully somebody else in the audience can come up and talk about the moderation sub-DAO proposal and discuss that further. Thank you, Ryder. Appreciate you taking the time and also putting up with my persistence to hopefully I don't sound condescending or arrogant in what I'm telling you, and sincerely
No,
appreciate
not
your
at all.
feedback.
Thank you, Archimedes, with first of all for all your work, for your detailed work at putting this together, and even including the sources you put from. It's very great. And well, also thank you for putting up with my questions, and thank you.
I thrive on your questions, Ryder. I thrive. Without them, I'm not sure, and I expect CryptoPauses and Dynites to continue bolstering my wings, my grape wings, the ones that I use to fly. Thanks,
Okay.
guys.
Have a great day. Personally, I need to step off and visit the bathroom for a moment. So anybody from the moderators wants to come up and talk, feel free.
you guys hear me? Okay. I'm a little puzzled. I would assume these DAO calls are meant for the DAO to discuss certain topics. I'm under the impression that the sub DAO moderator community management proposal would have been important enough for us to just hash out and make sure we move forward. But it seems as though I understand that people have different schedules and personal lives that might make it difficult to discuss this. I think the only question that was coming up was to evaluate whether or not there were ample metrics for us to be able to say that we understand what the funds are for, who the funds are for, what date ranges specifically, and then very clearly outline who gets the control sending them out, which I think is clear in the proposal. Tariq, Taiki, and Legend controlling the squads is not ideal, but it's still better than the alternative of a single individual controlling it. Last time we discussed this on Sunday, the question about metrics and participation came up. So the only missing piece to the proposal that was brought up was metrics and verifying the right individuals. And I've seen some conversations and updates that add a lot of color and context to, moderation across servers, Grape included. As far as the Grape Access server posts of all time that I saw, Tariq has done a lot of work there. Baba, who may or may not be included in any of the discussions, Krex, Legend, Ninja. I'm not sure about the time ranges or the date ranges here, but important for us to just dig into that and maybe move that discussion forward if we can. As I'm not head of a sub-DAO or the community management sub-DAO, I can't really speak to these things. All I can do is try and consolidate all the information that's been floating around and the additional documentation that was requested so we could have this conversation. And thus far, that's all I've requested of the community management sub-DAO is to provide the sheet. And it's all in the discourse. Thank you, Favor, for updating today and adding all the details of what this proposal entails in the Google spreadsheet supporting documentation to tell us what to expect. Does anybody have any comments, questions, or concerns about this? Whether part of the sub-DAO or not. This is the DAO being requested to emit funds for moderation work, much of which is deserved. So I'd like to get the right moderators and the people who are doing work paid, if we can, especially for the previous months that have already been worked on. That would be my two grapes, but if anybody has any objections or questions or concerns.
I'm back.
Hola.
Oh, I see you're still here. Have you returned?
I returned so that I could try and drive the conversation because it was kind of irking me that we have, roughly 15 to 20 people on the call at any given point in time, and no one's talking.
Well, yeah. Agava, you have been talking about the moderator's proposal?
Yeah, I'm just trying to get us to move forward with a discussion on, can we agree to agree, or do we have any disagreements here? Is there something we need to rehash again? Because there was a monkey wrench thrown into this conversation, and we asked for certain details to be provided by the sub-DAO. They provided the details, and now there's no consensus being discussed here on whether or not we all agree to move forward. Somebody could just take this and put it on chain, and then we can find out then, but I'd rather we have the discussion before that happens, if that's possible. Ideally, that would be helpful.
Yeah, for the past payment, I would like to read into it more, but
yeah,
it always gets a little murky once you start about debating past things.
Right.
For future payments, I would like to see a breakup of like by time zone or by servers, which moderators are like assigned to which servers or however that's handled internally. Yeah, because I have no idea how many moderators we have at what time available, and like are they busy or not? So it just
Yeah.
I would like to be able to like confirm that for me.
Yeah, and a lot of this is being self-policed by the sub-DAO itself, right? And what the DAO is asking, I think what the DAO was asking for recently, which is surprising that this wasn't potentially part of the equation before, it was, and it's just fallen off the wagon,
Yes.
is just very clear outlines of, hey, this is what we're asking for and why, which the proposal was very generic and explains that in numbers, but it doesn't tell us merit.
Yeah, I'm not much about currently on this. I'm not that much about merit. I'm more like, okay, we are setting up a capacity of moderators, and what's the demand? How many people do we have that need moderating? How many messages are coming in, and in what time zones? Or do we maybe have a time zone that is not covered at all, and where we would need some moderator to just be there?
Yep.
So I would like to
Good
comprehend
question.
and understand these things.
Good question. My two grapes would be, let's get a very clear understanding of what we just need to take care of for the prior activity and the prior, rewarding of work that's already been done in previous months. Clarify it, snapshots of each month. These are the people. If that's already provided in the Google Doc, then I'd like somebody to confirm that with me in writing on this call. But I think that's it, right? And I can see August, October, September, looking at the sheet. So all I see is checkboxes that say yes or no, and I guess it's subjective to whatever the sub-DAO decides those individuals deserve as payment, or they've agreed with themselves according to what's already illustrated in the actual proposal.
Yeah.
I'm speaking on behalf of the sub-DAO that really should be driving this conversation to make their case for their proposal.
Yeah. I'm also only seeing overall messages sent, which, well, if it's really overall, if it's the entire server, then, well, I have to start questions to question something like, if a moderator posts in whatever channel, does this count to moderation? And or is this not relevant for compensation over a message is sent, and it's just like an FYI metric? FYI.
Yeah. What I find interesting is that the three people that control the squads that we're being told to send this to aren't talking about it, which is interesting because it's almost like the bounty control process and the bounty master not talking about bounties. I'm really not going to say anything else in this regard. I've pushed Favor and the community sub-DAO to focus on trying to get us more information so we can avoid these misunderstandings and conversations and make sure nobody has any objections. But I do officially have to stop here, unfortunately, guys, and I'm sorry. I don't mean to leave you now, but I guess
No, man,
hopefully,
your real life takes priority.
Hopefully anybody in the community, in the group that's listening, if you'd like to come up and continue the conversation to help clarify and make this a simpler conversation, I challenge you. Thank you. Have a good one, Ryder. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dankeschön.
Bitte, bitte. Well, Cracks, I ask you A or B and you say yes. This does not compute at all. It is related to compensation. Okay, if it's related to compensation, in the sense of it's a measurement that that is taken into account when calculating compensation, then I would like to see a breakdown what this means in detail, because you can't just provide this here with a typo in it and come to the DAO, say you want funds based on this metric that is not explained clearly. I agree with you, Wales. It is lacking in metrics. It is lacking in and also lacking in explanations. And how come, if this is related to compensation, that you added it after where it's sent, it's lacking in metrics? I mean, how can you come up with a compensation value without a metric, and when you add in a metric and it's still the same compensation value? I'm getting confused here. Doris, denken wir gleich. Well, I mean, for past compensations, like I said, I'm not going to get on your case for past compensations very much. I don't think that is productive. But for future compensations, I'm very much interested in like what time zones are you guys active in, and do we have every time zone covered? That's something I'm interested in personally. Rex, there are some things just not matching up. Now you're telling me that you self-determine how much you pay each moderator based on how much or not so much work they do, and in your proposal you give a fixed number per person. So it's a kind of a, in your proposal it looks like you pay a fixed amount, and now you're saying you're not paying a fixed amount. I mean, okay, whatever, it's up to you in the end, but as soon as somebody asks questions and your response is not, oh, hey, we have this information and we just didn't want to overwhelm you, here it is, thank you. And you start, seems like a little bit dodging questions, it is a bit weird. So it's not like I'm on your case or anything. It's I only would like to know some things. And Archimedes was of a similar opinion, and Mr. Wales also told you that this lacks metrics. So take it how you would like it. Well, these metrics you mentioned that explain what you have accomplished. Besides the overall messages sent, I don't see any metrics that are comprehensible by me, at least, because Grape help messages support 1 or 0, setups 0 or 1, overall support 1 or 0. This is okay. I can say there were this many people doing that. Yeah, but that's the only. I'm not going further back than May. We only have this binary definition of 5 categories, which are Grape help, Grape access, overall support, help for events, and reach out to projects for GAN, which I see is not going good. Reach out to projects for GAN. Since June 2022, I don't see any green tick for reaching out for projects for GAN. Yeah. So that's, these binary metrics are not telling me much other than the person was active or not. And when you have the overall messages, which just tell me the overall messages in the server, I assume. So to say that this is all information it needs, I would disagree. Thank you, Jarvis. That's the exact same question I asked. What does overall messages sent mean? What is the definition of it? And please fix the typo on overall messages sent. I mean, this is a document where you're asking for payment. Legend, did you step off or are you just quiet and sitting somewhere? Okay. Well then. At least fix the typo legend. Or whoever has access to this. Well, I will write something. I could rather type this down in DAO channel. Better visibility. Favor, this is not the way it works. If you come to the DAO for payment and people ask questions, it's not the people, it's the people who are part of the DAO who will vote, ask question. It's not the job of the people who ask questions to answer these questions. It's your job to answer these questions. Or at least provide an explanation why you cannot. This is how the process works. If you cannot or do not want to answer the questions, then anybody of you or any gorilla can bring this on chain. But personally, I will not feel comfortable if you can't answer questions. Yes, like I said, you can go straight on chain. Nobody is stopping you from that. Wherever here's the link to stuff I just posted on DAO channel. We've noted down 4 points by you. So Mr. Pause is providing you guys with solutions on how to do this going forward. That's very kind of him. Because you didn't have to do this. Very selfless person with Mr. Pause. I tend to agree with this is a good approach for the overall compensation. Yes, of course, Pause. It's in all our interests, and we would like to help out. Cracks. We are always online and available to cover the server all through the day. We just wrote in DAO chat. I'm feeling insulted by now. You guys have to sleep. You have to eat. You can't tell me you are always online. It's not just something that happens like organically. So make your answer believable, please. Thank you. I'm not going to argue with you anymore, Grex. I posed my questions. You made your answer. My part is done. I'm done with that. Anybody else would like to speak up on anything? Otherwise, I think we're finished for today. There was once an agenda proposed by Archimedes. And we covered everything on it. Craig, so now you're deleting your messages in DAO chat. Okay, I see what you're playing. Well, nobody else has come up. I'm finished for the day. Bye bye, guys.